Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Robinson, or the Play Typer Guy, as my son calls me. I'm delighted to have with me today my friend Opal Peachey, a wonderfully talented writer, performer from Seattle, who is going to be bringing her unique brand of joy to the Portland area with her production of The Fairies Bottom at the Alberta Abbey. And thank you for joining us, Opal.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, a little bit about myself. I think um, so. Cabaret. I think that what I do, and you said it's a brand of joy, and I really love that description because I think that, um, especially with cabaret, knowing that you're going in and you might, you know, cabaret is defined by sitting down, having something to drink, watching a show. That's what cabaret is defined as, and in Berlin, that's what they're doing there, where it came from. But we like to think that cabaret can include lots of disparate elements. It can have Shakespeare, burlesque, which in Portland is something a little bit sexier than Seattle. So I'm excited about that. And it can have comedy, really fast paced sketch comedy. It can have aerial performance. It can have acrobatics, live music, can music, really anything you want to throw at the story you're putting on. My specific type of cabaret that I create with my producer, Mark Ciano, we like to be more on the narrative side of things. We like to tell a story and really flip something classic on its head. Our most popular show, that's been running for 7 years now, with production coming up in January at the Triple Door, is called Bohemia. And Bohemia follows classical musicians as they search for inspiration at the bottom of a bottle of absinthe. And so what we did was we took the music of Dvorak and Chopin and Debussy, the work of Alphonse Mucha, and we modernized it. Our language is very anachronistic, as is our comedy. We pride ourselves on being pretty dirty. When we did the Fairies Bottom at the Triple Door this summer, I came out to say hello after the show. I played Titania, the fairy queen, and I play a man in our other show. So this was really fun to play Titania, who's very femme. She's got big curly hair. She's got a pretty sexy outfit, although not as sexy as some of the other performers. But it does me justice, I think. And I would go out there and say hello and give hugs to people, and bar none, they'd say, "Oh, you wrote the show? Wow, I loved how dirty it was," with like a little wink nudge. It is called The Fairies Bottom, and let's just say my character has a song that is called The Ode to Bottom. So we really go there with humor to do with the rear end. And Shakespeare goes there as well. So I think that we've got some historical basis and classical support in our jokes. But I think that's really, I think, what folks will take away from our shows that is a little different than some other cabaret out there, is it's pretty funny. I think that we get people laughing, and then we make them a little bit Twitter-pated with the burlesque. This is definitely a burlesque show as opposed to some other productions that we've done. It's circles around this festival that Titania is throwing for her husband, Oberon, who has come back from a year abroad where they've taken a break on their relationship. And he's returning home, and she's ready to forgive everything. And just like the harvest festival to come, she is ready to start afresh with their relationship. And the new moon is coming, eclipse season is right around the corner. And so she's having all her fairies present their most beautiful dances for Oberon. Now, the dancing gets started. The fairies are transforming themselves and, doing everything that the new moon makes you want to do. And Oberon loves the show, but his responses and his reactions to the dancers quickly get him kicked out of the party by Titania. And she is, she's just feeling all of the feelings that come up with that. I sing a song then that happens with performance. A beautiful, this time around, it will be Agatha and Gina, who is a really incredible aerialist and contortionist and dancer. And she's going to be performing while I'm singing. And after that point, things get pretty heated. And Oberon, who's really upset at being kicked out from the party, he decides to use a love potion to make Titania fall in love with the next live thing that she sees. And he uses the most famous fairy of all time, I think, the character Puck. He uses Puck to go out into the audience and find the naughtiest thing out there for Titania to fall in love with. And that is, of course, Bottom, the fairy's Bottom, the best bottom in the house. So we do go out and choose a member of the audience and bring them on stage for me to fall in love with the Ode to Bottom, which is my big song and dance number with the wild card. So that is really my track in the show. Things go sideways from there. Oberon's gone, but Titania's got a new love. And so she says, hey, the second half of the show, it's all for the ass. It's all for the bottom. So let's really go there. And the acts get really more sideways. I think that we are definitely planning with this new version of the show to embrace the spooky season, some fun elements there. And when it goes too far, that's when Oberon says, whoa, whoa, Puck, we need to pull it back. I want my queen back. I want Titania back to what she was before, the person that I love. And everything ends like it does in Shakespeare with a nice little bow around it. Although there aren't 5 acts, it's 90 minutes long. It's a lot of fun. There are a lot of original music numbers that I'm really proud of. And it was a huge hit in Seattle this summer. It was the first new show that I have written in since 2019, The Champagne Widow at Nordo. And so that just felt so good after, performing after everything that went down, which, I can talk about more about Nordo if you want, but it definitely felt really fun to get it out there. And if you're wanting the story of why it's going to Portland, so we put out the press release for the Fairy's Bottom in the spring when we're in the midst of writing the show, and Alberta Abbey contacted us.
Oh,
They reached
wow.
out to Mark based on the press release, which I think that, the media between Seattle and Portland, I feel like there's similar writers. People are well connected. Everybody's got friends. It's not so very far away. And so they reached out to us and said, hey, we do a lot of music. And since following them, they really do a lot of very eclectic, uh, really interesting programming, I think, but they are dipping their toe in burlesque. And they said they've definitely had success with it before, but they were interested in our show and did we want to come to Portland and do it? And they wanted us for that summer, but that wasn't going to work for our different production schedules. So Mark suggested October, and I think that while we really had a midsummer theme for the show when we did it at the Triple Door, there are over 30 Shakespeare references. A lot of them are with the Scottish play, with Hamlet. These are plays that really Shakespeare is fascinated with death and
Mhm.
transformation. And I think that fairies certainly lend themselves to any time of year. So I was, as a playwright, really excited about taking a look at the skeleton of the script, because Cabaret, it's just a skeleton. We have riff written in left and right in the script, so we really change it up depending on the audience, the performers, and I think the songs are set, but that's that's really about it. So I was excited about bringing it into October and making that a new version for Portland, which, wow, it really seems like, looking at and meeting with the artists. I'll talk a little bit about that, what we're doing with the hiring of the artists
Mhm.
in Portland. But it really does feel like this is a town that loves to get dark.
Oh, yeah. We're
Yeah.
it's we are still a weird place. The
Yes.
mantras keep Portland weird, but we remain so. And that's why I was so excited you came, especially to the Alberta arts district in general, which has a history of like just being kind of perfect for what you guys do. Um, and something I've noticed, also this because of the work that you've done and my kind of relationship with you through Nordo, Cafe Nordo in Seattle. Um, Something that people I've noticed that they really wanted after the pandemic was what they missed was not so much stories well told, because we all want that and that's everywhere and they do that, but they could kind of do that at home. What they missed was sort of the connection with an audience, with other people, either in movies, and with Barbie was an example of that, of getting dressed up and having a shared experience is really wonderful. And that's something you've have done even prior to the pandemic. Bohemia, Shapiro, it's a sort of an experience of, as I said, of joy, of people that you're engaging with the audience. It's fun. It's what people kind of really want to see. And, frankly, it's what Shakespeare was doing. That's something I've always been hammering. If you look at the plays, and when I've worked with young people, it's a Marvel film. There's like huge stakes and there's fights. So kids always love when they get to do the sword fights from Romeo and Juliet. And he was body. There was like even in the tragedies, there would be a moment when there's like dirty puns or dirty jokes, and the audience was fully engaged. It wasn't just sit down, shut up, don't make any sounds or we'll call you out. It's more like we expect this. It's almost like a sporting event, um, that type of thing. So I feel like that's what people really have been having a hunger for. And I know Marciano, your partner, had experienced some, obviously great success with that. With
What you said there, I think things that are recognizable, Shakespeare used to great effect. He was using certainly historical characters and ghosts, witches, or these fairies that when we're thinking about the great fairies of the Celtic mythology, and all of the wonderful sort of the icons of that time were the Greeks. He was using things like Marvel that people already had a relationship with, and yet spinning it on its head and really making them listen to the character, because you didn't quite know if you were going to like them or hate them or fall in love with them, because of that beautiful language. You might do all three. It is absolutely capable of looking at the story from lots of different perspectives. I like to think that you mentioned the body bits. One of my favorite parts of the show to deliver is, and I'm not quite sure how this will go this time around, because we do have new guest performers from the Portland area who I have yet to meet in person. All the interviews have been done over Zoom, or watching their videos, getting recommendations. But I have a bit where I talk about one of the fairies who to Tanya, perhaps have a fancy for, and I get to deliver a big list of all of the body different things that Shakespeare has said in like 4 different plays. I get to say each and every one of them to this performer who's standing in really not much more than they were born in. And it is really pretty fun to get to take to cherry pick those wonderful lines and to give the effect of it, because even if you've never seen a Shakespeare play, even if you have no idea who the character Puck is, or Titania, or the plot of Midsummer Night's Dream, or of the Scottish play, or you're like, why is she calling it the Scottish play? What's she talking about? Like, even if you don't know those theater geek jokes, you are knowing that what I'm saying to this person is something sexy, because look at them. Like, what else would it be? So I think that this show definitely delivers on those levels. I don't claim to be Shakespeare, but we definitely quote heavily. So Shakespeare's definitely present, and there's the great, I think Mark, my co-producer who wrote the show with me and wrote the music as well. We do a lot together. Um, he uses the character of Puck. He plays Oberon, and Puck is the hench person. And Puck says to the audience, all right, let me translate for you, and gives in very modern speech a translation of what in Shakespeare Oberon's saying. And I think that that helps, take the Shakespeare down a peg, which Shakespeare was doing anyway with
Mhm.
the kings and the queens and all of those historical people. He was explaining in the verse one thing, and then telling folks in prose what was going on. So we really enjoyed taking a look at those plays and pulling them apart. As a classical performer myself, one of the reasons I wanted to do Midsummer Night's Dream and to pull these characters was um, Mark and I, before we met in our teens, 20s, we were both cast as the fairy, unnamed, not even a peas blossom or a mustard seed, but the unnamed fairy for several productions each. Like, apparently, that's the castability for both of us. And so we had relationship with that play, and it was really fun to be able to, turn it around and take our spin on it, and add in those other favorites, which for me definitely are um, Macbeth, the Scottish play, Taming of the Shrew, Twelfth Night. Um, we've got great Hamlet references in there as well, but I got to say, okay, these are the ones. Mark has Julius Caesar, give or take.
And it's interesting because the first time I met you, I think was the production Book It had done with Cafe Nordo of A Movable Feast. And I was very impressed with your performance, specifically of how you engaged with the audience from as soon as we sort of met, like you, and even just sort of as the kind of give a sense of what Nordo was doing. The servers, the hosts are sort of part of the world that's been created there. And as soon as we enter, you are sort of, as the host, kind of part of that world and introducing us to that world. And there was such constant humor that you were bringing over the entire night, which, I just adore. I think, and most, I know a lot of people who kind of really enjoy that aspect of the experience beginning as soon as you sort of enter. And you're sort of very good at that. Was that something that's always been part of your? You're often known as the sort of adorable member concierge.
Yeah,
Is that sort of always as being this great host? Um,
thank you so much. That's really so kind, and I think that the immersive quality certainly that service brings, to speak to Nordo specifically, because when you entered the theater or the dining room, you were handed a glass of champagne, or you were invited to order a beautiful wine from a menu that was, picked from Alice B. Toklas's cookbook in the case of A Movable Feast, served by a French maid, who was the maid of Gertrude Stein. And even though what I was saying wasn't scripted, it was in character. So I think that the element of service was really where I was coming from as a performer, because um, my day job, certainly I'm a trained actor, and I had a day job, as many trained actors do in my 20s, which was I was um, a checkout person, and worked the demo stand at Trader Joe's for over a decade, and that helped me get my theater career off its feet, and it helped me until Nordo was ready to open the venues, just stay afloat. And it's weird to put a plug for Trader Joe's, but the I can't really speak, since I haven't worked there in a long time, but pre-pandemic, certainly the customer service element and the feeling of neighbors, and the chatty quality of it, the feeling like we were really speaking to you and we're going to be honest about the products. There was a role that was a helmsperson, which was just standing around and talking to people as they came in for their groceries and helping them. That was what I was best at, and I got a lot
mhm.
of praise for it there. And I really think that it taught me, like many artists, I'm an introvert extrovert, but this taught me to not be afraid to look at somebody, think about what they might be wanting, and to help them. And I think that it's that service element that Nordo saw in me when they hired me as an actor for their first show, and when we started just a wonderful, that was my career that took me into my next decade, into my 30s. And um, it was so satisfying to be able to bring my sure, they called me the adorable member concierge there, and it was a little joke, but I think that it was that eager to please and ready to serve, but also ready to make it a little delicious and fun and in character. And I think that's really what people want uh, at Nordo. Certainly, they wanted that little in, like, why should I order this drink? Or are you going to tell me? Are you going to tell me a little bit of what's going to happen next? Or oh, we can see that this happened to you in the last scene, so we're on your side. That's been going on
Mhm.
in theater for a long time. I love the Marvel analogy because we pick a side, we pick somebody who represents us. I'm a
Mhm.
Deadpool, or I'm a Harley Quinn. That's probably not Marvel, so
DC, but also
yeah,
the actor who played her recently passed away, and Arlene Sorkin, who is
yeah.
great. And so, yes, in all the Harley Quinn references, I've worked with organizations and even outside of theater and certain nonprofits who have been struggling, and often on the development side and connecting with audiences and building a member base or subscriber base, for the, I think, somewhat antiquated term. And I've often said, well, part of the challenge is you don't have an Opal, because you really
Mhm.
brought that hostess aspect to engaging with the audience and the members, and sort of, hey, if you booked, are you going to be coming to see the show? You need to bring more people in. I can make that work. And sort of
Yeah.
what you brought to that um, is just so important for that theatrical experience, because then it was sort of an experience that started from when, even before you entered, you're kind of like being taken care of. And I think that is so key. I mean, your style of work has always interested me. Something that Nordo did that I really liked was sort of, there was a kind of a repertory company aspect. There were some people who were often in the shows, and you were in most of their shows. And when I came along and was working with them, and when was co-writing Jitterbug Perfume, I loved you played a trousers part, you played a guy, but you also were playing multiple other characters and doing it so well. And it was so much fun to kind of watch you swoop in and swoop out. Also do some really quick costume changes. Some of them I was like, how was that? I was like, I don't know. I was talking to some folks, Terry and Aaron, and it was like,
He didn't have
how is
much
it gonna be
help
possible?
either.
And they're like,
Like,
Opal can make it work. And I think that wasn't often a
yeah,
term that was used.
I was very invested. I think that Nordo gave me a home. Certainly, I took the jump and quit my day job, mostly because I was able to have my role be off stage and on, helping with box office subscribers. It really felt like it was easy for me to be invested in the whole thing. Um, Jitterbug Perfume was wonderful because certainly the lead, Marcel, was the lead, and I love all of the text to go with that. But the Ren character, I think at the very top of the show, I'm so grateful to be able to play that. I think that one is one that really has stuck with me. When in playing Titania, there, being a female character and having many sides to yourself. Certainly, Titania is jealous, and she's vindictive, yet she's in love, deeply in love, and she's betrayed. There's lots of things that are going on for her, and taking like a putting on the long wig and the sexy outfit and putting on the feminine perspective um, is very, very interesting. And I kept thinking about Ren because in that play was also a play where I had a big long wig, and it started it off, but I was going to change into a man costume later on to play Marcel. And we weren't fooling anyone about what gender they might think that I am when they look at my meat suit, I guess you'd say. But we weren't fooling anyone. But it was putting on those little indicators that would tell people what to expect and what character I was playing. That is to say, I think for Ren, there was really something that felt very, very feminine to her, and beyond the wig, it was the support that she was giving her spouse, the king, and that he would take on. She was dead and gone, but he was going to take that on and take it into his next great love, uh, very beautifully. And I guess I was thinking of her because you wouldn't think of her as the great part of that love story, but she
Mm.
was really important. And I
Yeah.
think that um, that is a role. That's really what I've tried to do with my career, is not necessarily be the lead part or the big star, but to be the important person who gives you something that you can take on. And at Nordo, they used to call me the button, in that they could put me in and they'd press me and I would go off. And that was exactly what they needed me to do, in any given role. And certainly, um, I think that you can talk to lots of character actors who will say the same thing. Like, it is the most satisfying thing to be able to transform, to be able to have someone say, "Oh, I had no idea that was you until you opened your mouth and I heard your voice." And that, getting to do that with this show, because, folks are used to seeing me in my pants role playing Frederick Chopin in Bohemia, since I've been doing that for many years now, or they saw Marcel, or they saw another, failure from The Witching Hour, where I was this bulbous, crazy costume on. They saw one of those, and they get to see me doing something more. You mentioned the Barbie, right? Like, more traditional femme, but they don't recognize me because they're not used to seeing it. So I think I get to have that with this, even though it does feel a little strange to be, you're a queen fairy. You cast yourself in that role, and as producer, playwright, I get to do that. And it feels like the right time.
Yeah.
It does feel like the right time for it. And coming into, casting yourself as a queen and coming into a theater scene, Portland, the cabaret, the circus, like, incredible stuff happening in the circus world in Portland. But I've got no idea what to expect. I'm coming in low status.
Mhm.
So I'm really excited to earn it, because I don't think we're going to fail. I think we will earn it. We'll earn people's respect. They'll love the show. They will laugh their butts off. They'll really enjoy it. But there's a long way to go, Stephen, from here to there. We open in, a little under a month, and we're just in the process of casting the other guest performers. That we're really doing our best to reach out, to folks that are active in the scene right now, trying to just see what is it like to perform here. What do audiences want? Because we're not going to know. Only people who are working and gigging here will know that. So I mean, you're interviewing me, but I'm really curious about what you think, the difference, in the art scene between Portland and Seattle are.
Mhm.
Because, like I was saying earlier, it does feel like, you know, Portland is more Seattle than Seattle sometimes, because,
Mhm.
what are the stereotypes of Portland? We made a joke in our Seattle version about, "Oh, your beard, right? Yeah, I can tell." Or strippers versus burlesque. "Oh yeah, there's that." But keep it weird. What is Seattle known for? And the joke, Mark would like raise his eyebrows and was like, "Ooh, tech bros," you know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, definitely. I know I've always been biased about, suggesting mounting certain Nordo productions or certain things in Portland. Portland has a
Mm,
huge, food scene, even
yes.
obviously more so than, Seattle. It also is such a and this is me myself personally, because I lived in Seattle that's where we met, for about 7 years. For moving out to Portland, but it's such a kind of city of neighborhoods, and the neighborhood feel there is, really, that sense of community is great. And I think that's something, I'm involved in the Theater Portland Playhouse here, which is in the Northeast Portland neighborhood that I live in. And it really does feel like sort of a community, or people who kind of show up from the community and from the space, who kind of like almost like a church in a certain way. The Portland Playhouse is literally in an old church. So that's something that's been really cool. And I think that it really works for the type of work that you do. I think it
Mm,
is, there's sometimes a tendency of theaters, in major cities, and Seattle wants to be that of like, um, we want to stay, be like New York or be a major city, and we want to bring in actors from New York and London, and like then do a play that was developed and produced in a sure thing from London. And you know, uh, I get that, but what I always liked about Nordo and then certain Portland theaters here was we're developing local talent, local artists, and a local feel. And a success for us is sort of developing something new and cool that works in this area and kind of building that sort of cult appeal. You've done that obviously tremendously well, though. I'd like to talk a bit about the Champagne Widow for
Mm.
folks who don't know, because that was such a tremendous piece of work you did, and you worked with such amazing women producing that for Naruto. And can you just talk a bit about it and maybe how you see it similar to the Fairy's Bottom and Bohemia, and how it might be very different from that, like just your experience?
What a great question. Well, like, I'll definitely talk about The Champagne Widow, which was produced in 2019, and that was written by myself. I've spent a lot of my career happily collaborating with other artists as a writer. Um, Marciano and I have a storied relationship. We we have written, I think, I have to count them: Modern Love, Seattle Vice, Bohemia, Twister Beach, and now The Fairy's Bottom. So 5 cabaret musicals where we've written the music, um, the book, all of that, and produced them several times, and toured them to Berlin, New York. But there was a point where we had a bit of a break of a couple of years, and I was really thinking, um, that I wanted to write something that was for me. And I had read, The Widow Clicquot, which is a fantastic book that talks about the history of Veuve Clicquot, who was, a woman, the world's first female CEO in France, during the beginning of the 19th century. She, uh, pioneered many things in the champagne industry, and due to a loophole, she was allowed to own her own business, which women were considered property in France at the time under Napoleon. Um, and she, has a very famous wine house now. And if you speak English or don't speak French, most people don't know that Veuve Clicquot, it means widow Clicquot, that she was a real person, and that she, based on how she was able to sort of jump through this loophole, that when your spouse died, you were able to inherit his business and have a bank account and be a member of society. So only widows were allowed to do that. And she was the first, um, most famous, I should say. There were maybe a couple before her that aren't as regarded, but we'll say she was the first. And then after that, there was, the widow Bollinger, Laurent Perrier, um, and these famous women, Louise Pommery, who came afterward. And so there's a lineage that's pretty unbroken of champagne widows that goes through World War One and World War II. And these women suffered incredibly. The loss of your husband is unimaginable loss, but it allowed them to become the leaders of these champagne houses, and do things that perhaps other women weren't allowed to do. So that contrast I felt was so interesting. The difference between this effervescent, bubbly, so feminine, so beautiful, sparkling wine, and death, widows. So why what were their stories? And I wanted to tell them, and with the help of certainly my incredible dramaturg Daryl Connors, who's working on a film documentary of champagne widows right now, that's going to be taking place she's already doing interviews in France about that. And then my director Billy Wildrick and composer Anastasia Workman, we worked together and we created the Champagne Widows, the Champagne Widow being myself, a musical that we served at Nordo with a 5-course meal created by Chef Aaron Brindley and a 5-glass tasting menu that featured Veuve Clicquot, Veuve Pommery, Veuve Laurent Perrier, and Veuve Boulanger. And we told their stories, each with a glass of bubbly. I paired with Veuve Clicquot for that. And it was so much work. I was the lead performer, and you also wrote it, brand new play. And it was a great success, sold out our 21 performance run, gangbusters, and it received, really wonderful reviews. I've been asked many times, is there plans to remount that and do it again?
Mhm.
And, it being the production that happened the year and then the pandemic, I have to say I've sat on it for a little bit. I'm not quite sure what the next steps for it will be, but it was so gratifying to be the one who was able to tell so many people what the stories of these fantastic wines and women were. And also, I'm a Francophile. What can I say? I don't speak French, which is a terrible thing for a Francophile, but man, I'm just a movable feast. Put me in Paris, put me with Hemingway, give me a glass of champagne. I want to be a part of that strangely attractive thing. And just kind of digging in as to why I find it exciting is there's a lot of stuff there. I've got just a lot of ideas about what might happen next, but as far as how that relates to the fairy's bottom, I think that there are stories that are behind the ones that we tell, and there are versions of classic characters that might appeal to maybe not the status quo. You might learn about Shakespeare in your high school English class, but you didn't know or didn't embrace the more subversive elements, maybe the bawdier elements or the elements that are queer and were queer then and are now. You didn't really think about that, but I think that in telling those stories of those women, I was able to put my American, raised in Seattle version of it out there. And I think that I'm doing the same thing with these Shakespeare characters. That's how I see it. And you can like it or not. Um,
For my
but I get
own,
to have my little say on history. And so that
yeah.
definitely, in a long version, Champagne Widows is that history. And I was trying to be true to it, but I would also put my stamp on it. And the Fairy's Bottom is my version of Shakespeare, my stamp.
Mhm.
Champagne Widows, that was me. So I didn't have Mark over my shoulder, but I think that everyone's always happy to see a show that we do together because he's really funny.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
he definitely
he's
is.
great. He
And
brings that timing.
but
So,
you are definitely as well a very
oh, thank
funny
you.
person. And I would think there's sort of from my sort of theatrical eye a sort of strain of magical realism in your work that I really
Oh,
appreciate, and I think that's sort of the common thread. So
all
people, if they
right.
enjoy this,
No,
they would
I
certainly
appreciate you saying
enjoy.
that.
They would certainly enjoy the Champagne Widow because you could tell that's a story you could tell pretty straight, and it would still be wonderful. But I think you did it in such a creative and fanciful way that was so much fun and also engaged the audience, and it seemed to come off Jitterbug, which is also very magical realism, very well, sort of a kind of almost like it had been planned because it was sort of the same idea of a world that's recognized with our own, but we sort of embrace the magic of the world. We're not trying to do television, for instance, or film. It's like it's broad can be good and get grounded, and I really appreciated that about it. It was such a creative work.
So I'd like to add, you've reminded me of something that is really applicable to both. So thank you for that. So the magical realism, as a performer, there is castability. And with the Champagne Widow, my director who worked with me beat for beat on this thing, Billy was really on it. And originally, when I wrote the show, I had a version of it that was a one-person show. And then, like you said, I could tell the stories. Then I split it off, and it was one person with like 4 people watching who also played bit parts. So I could have some other characters in there with me, more fun. And I played every widow and another character. And Billy said to me, she looked at me and she was like, you know, I think that you're going to be more successful if you pull out the widows. There are great actors who can play all of these parts. And what do you do well? And she mentioned the spirit, ethereal, magical sort of quality that I possess and putting that on stage. So my character, my husband called it Sock, Spirit of Champagne, which I liked to think of as a little sock puppet, which was fun for me if it seemed too intense. But Sock was a magical being and told the stories of these widows as they came out of the bottles, like genies in the bottle, right? So I got to be magical and pretty much do whatever I wanted because that's what magical beings get to do. And so, certainly with the fairies, it's another chance to lean in for me and play a fairy, play somebody who is, perhaps since I was, you know, 21 and cast at Seattle Shakespeare Company in my first Midsummer Night's Dream. Uh, that's an easy sell for an audience. They look at me and they're like, "Ah, she perhaps has some magical powers." Which that's not a bad thing. But with Nordo, I was able to break it up. I got to play a cop. I got to play all sorts of cool different types of things. But yeah, I think that you are right. It's a magical realism element and a way of storytelling where we say to the audience, you are here, we're telling you a story, you get to completely go there with us. And just with words often.
You mentioned the cop. You had played a cop in Jitterbug, and it was
Mhm.
it is a scene, and
My cop.
it wound up being one of the favorites, my most favorite scenes in the play that I'd written because of what you did with it and the sort
It
of
was so fun.
the comedy you built with the great Helen Roundhill as
Yes.
Priscilla. It was just so great, and it like you were literally wearing Marcel's pants. You took the jacket off and put a cop hat on, and you are a Seattle. You're so different from this French person and body and form, and this is such a fun. It wound up being such a funny scene, so such a delight.
And
So thank
I
you again
got
for that.
cast as a cop right after that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they brought me in for It's a Wonderful Life, and I got to play the cop in that, Bert. So it was really
Yes,
fun.
you apparently can embrace law enforcement very well and find the humor in that.
Yeah.
So that was great. While I still have you here, I do. When we were talking about the pandemic, I know you had been working toward mounting a production in Europe,
Yes.
and then unfortunately the pandemic occurred. I think there's a story for so many of us who had been working on something and then the pandemic occurred and it stopped. But the good news is you were able to actually resume this and go back to and that was so wonderful. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. So the Cabaret Exchange was the project, and my co-producer Mark Ciano had been in Berlin traveling, and we had, our show Bohemia, which follows the Czech composer Dvorak, the Polish composer but expat, lived in Paris for forever, Chopin, and Alphonse Mucha, also from Prague. We really had thought, let's take this to Europe. Let's see what people think of our, bastardized version of these great artists. And we think it would be great. Plus, we love to tour the show. So we raised a lot of funds to take it to not Prague or Paris, but Berlin, because Mark went to Berlin. He saw how many cabarets there, these great Weimar era cabarets that are going on still, were English speaking. And it felt like, especially in Berlin, such a global city, English was the language. And people, Berliners and the expats who lived there, were happy to go to theater and see a play in English. And so he thought ours would do well. We raised the funds. We were all set to go, tickets bought. It was April 1st, 2020, that we were all supposed to get on a plane. Everyone knows what happened. We lost a lot of money. we had crowdsourced, fundraised for that. We had promised rewards for people. The second part of that was that we had paired with the incredible European artist Lapustra to bring Lapustra's Naughty Salon from Berlin to Seattle. So that was going to be the trade. We would produce our show in Berlin at the Bauhaus Theater, and we would bring Lapustra that summer to the Triple Door in Seattle. So we had promised all of our backers that they could come see that show, and the tickets were bought for that leg of it as well. Obviously, I was excited to go to Europe, but also incredibly excited to meet and host these great European artists who had never been to Seattle before. And the good news is we did in 2022 do that. We brought Lapustra's Naughty Salon to Triple Door in September. And then in October, we went for not 2 weeks as originally planned. We were there for 1 week. And we played to sold out houses in Berlin at the Bauhaus and learned a lot.
Hmm.
I think that out of that came the idea for the Fairies Bottom, because we loved doing our show. Some of the feedback that we received was that the anachronisms and the comedy, we pared it down, but it felt like even audiences where English is maybe a second language or even a first language, but you live in another place, not Seattle, America, they needed that thing to hold on to. And while our show was, I think, a success, we felt like something like Shakespeare that is really more, certainly in Berlin, everybody knows who
Hmm.
Shakespeare is and have more familiarity with them than, say, Bohemian composer, it's classical music. And we wanted to have a show that had a little bit of a smaller cast. That was also a lesson we learned, since our ensemble, we ended up bringing 12 people overseas, which was a lot. And we wanted to have something that had a little bit more of an easy appeal, and also had a more sparse script, less reliant on big, narrative plot points, so that it would maybe be a little bit easier to understand for somebody who English was not their first language. I think that maybe Fairies Bottom does that. We've only done the show once, so it's a little hard to say, but there are plans to potentially bring the show to Berlin either next year or in 2025. So those two are connected, and it was wonderful. I will say that my personal thing with the Cabaret Exchange, talking about hosting, I want to meet artists that live in those places. So the best way to do that is to hire them. And what we did when we brought Bohemia to Berlin was we hired a Berliner performer, Lola Latiz, who played our Sarah Bernhardt. So we met on Zoom, and then she was there for one rehearsal, and then we popped her in to do the burlesque part and cameo, and got to meet that performer and get to know her. And that's our hope, really, with any show that we tour, is that we are hiring artists that are in the city that we are going, so that we can meet them, get to know them, and certainly, selfishly, their friends and family will come see the show. And that
No,
helps us out, certainly, because you need to fundraise a lot, but we do pay everyone based on the ticket sales. So that is always a roll of the dice for every show that we do. But yeah, that's the story of the Cabaret Exchange. And gosh, I love to travel. I took my family with me, and it was a really wonderful
yeah.
experience.
Oh,
But
you've written very well about this experience. I can I'll have a link in the show notes and down below to how you described your experience, especially as a mom with a
yeah, my
young
blog,
child.
right.
And I think that people enjoy reading that. But it's no, I'm very impressed with what you do, and I'm glad that you are bringing it out to the Portland area. Hopefully more, maybe even Champagne Widow.
Oh,
Shop
that would be
around.
great. Well, I mean, I think most people love champagne, and even if you don't drink, like, it's interesting to hear the stories of these really pioneering feminists, although they're French, so they wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think people do not. It's a sort of an interesting thing. I think people don't enjoy labels, yet they identify with what. So I think some people, and I think this could be a challenge of theater, can lead with the theme and the message. And so this is such a pro-Black play or pro-feminist play or something. And I think people are just like human beings, right? So it's sort of like you're telling this story. I think people are open to these experiences and they will come and they will appreciate this regard, when you are actually giving voice to people who've not been given a voice previously. I think and I think that's what I appreciated, that you kind of, this was this wonderful story you were telling. You did it with all these women, and it was itself feminist without it having to be a sort of political treatise. It's sort of, no, it's just, this is the story. Or a story of life is often going to be about women standing up to these sort of these situations and being who they are and everything. And I think that was sort of a great
Yeah,
thing that.
I hope that anyone who would see the Champagne Widow or Fairy's Bottom would take away whatever opinions, they're welcome to have whatever opinions they want about the show. I think that as a writer, and I'm sure you can relate to this, having been in wonderful conversations with you in the room, it's always the question of showing or telling, right?
Mhm.
You can show what this is what it was, and it's up to the audience to then be that scene partner and tell you. And if you're a host, if you're out there, which I plan to be at Alberta Abbey, every single person who comes in is going to see me welcoming them in and trying to get a bead on who they are, because often people will tell you what they think. Uh,
Mhm.
and if I hope to be willing to go out there and to meet the feedback head on. Um, but it's so interesting to hear your takeaway from the shows too, because it's been a little bit, for the Champagne Widow, and certainly since you've moved to Portland
Mhm.
full time, and your family there, like there's been so much water under the bridge, and I think that when I go to the theater now, or to any immersive event, because goodness knows it's so more prevalent now than it was in 2015 when Nordo opened our venues. Um, I go in almost like a clean slate because I just have so much more opinion. I have so much more
Yeah, absolutely.
personal history. So uh, I hope that I hope you're able to see it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll definitely be there. I'm very excited to see it. Um, and yeah, I think it's definitely what folks are wanting to see and wanting to enjoy. So, can you tell the folks where to find you, both yourself professionally and in this show as
Oh,
well?
yeah. So here's what's fun. My real name is Opal Peachey. It's Pennsylvania Dutch, so it's Peachy with an EY. I am at opalpeachy.com. I am on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the usual suspects. And you can find me there. I think Instagram is probably the spot where I'm hanging out the most these days. Check out my stories, and that will have links in my bio to the shows. We're also on the Alberta Abbey website. Tickets are through Eventbrite for the Fairies Bottom. And The Artist Mama is my blog. I have a 2-year-old, and I've been performing and, working in the arts through the pandemic since he was a little one. I didn't take a break. So, yeah, you can read about me there. I haven't I haven't posted about that one in a little while, but I'm sure you can relate as a parent. It's like he's he's 2. He's walking around. I am not scribbling notes. My downtime is I'm trying to like work the show stuff and perform and do that. But I have in my head like a few more posts, and he will be haunting the playgrounds in Northeast Portland too, because they're coming with when they can, right? You don't want
Excellent.
to leave anyone behind, let alone the 2-year-old.
All right, and the Fairies Bottom, it will be at Alberta Abbey, and can you tell us the dates again and
Yes.
the
So
shows?
the Fairies Bottom will play Alberta Abbey October 5th through the 8th. We have one show on the 5th. We have 2 shows on the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th. And you can get those tickets at Eventbrite or bit.ly/Portland Ferry.
Great. And all that information will be down below. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Opal. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing more of your work. Again, hint, hint, down in Portland as well, because I think the area will definitely appreciate what you have to offer. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and check out Opal. We'll see you again next time. Take care.